the singing actors of Hollywood. Hollywood has always loved stars who could do it all. The screen idols who could sweep audiences off their feet with a dramatic performance and then step onto a stage and command a crowd with nothing but a microphone. For decades, these double threats weren't just a novelty, they were box office gold. And behind the polished images, the red carpets, and the applause, there were rivalries, scandals, and secrets that made their stories even more fascinating. Today, we'll pull back the curtain on the actors who weren't satisfied with conquering just one world. From the smooth voice of Dean Martin to the troubled brilliance of Judy Garland, from the crooning dominance of Bing Crosby to the commanding presence of Barbra Streisand, this is the story of the singing actors of Hollywood. When you think of Hollywood's classic singing actors, Dean Martin immediately comes to mind.
Everybody loves somebody sometime.
Born Dino Paul Crocetti, he started out not as a star, but as a nightclub crooner with a velvet-smooth voice. What set Martin apart was his ability to slip seamlessly between two careers that most found impossible to juggle. On one hand, he was topping charts with hits like That's Amore and Rivalry. On the other, he was holding his own on screen alongside comedy partner Jerry Lewis in a string of hit movies throughout the 1940s and 50s. But it wasn't just charm that made Dean a legend. It was his uncanny ability to blur the line between music and acting. His performances in films like Rio Bravo 1959 proved he wasn't just a singer playing at acting. He had depth, humor, and grit. Critics who dismissed him as the pretty voice with a tuxedo were silenced when he won audiences over with that relaxed, understated acting style. Still, behind the scenes, Dean's life wasn't as effortless as his public image. His famous drunk persona on stage, the man with the whiskey glass in hand, barely making it through a line without a smirk, was mostly an act. Offstage, Martin was far more reserved, even shy. But that illusion became part of his Hollywood mystique. Of course, you can't mention Dean Martin without talking about his partner in crime, Frank Sinatra. Together, they dominated Las Vegas, Hollywood, and television screens as part of the Rat Pack. On stage, they laughed, joked, and pretended to stumble through numbers as if it was all improvised. In reality, their rehearsals were razor-sharp, every line timed to perfection.
It's all too wonderful.
Not too loud.
You never find a word saying.
He's a Secret Service singer, folks.
But beneath the camaraderie, there was rivalry. Sinatra, the voice, prided himself on being the most powerful singer in America. Dean, meanwhile, had that effortless cool, the ability to make a song sound like a casual conversation, as if he didn't even have to try. Sinatra respected Dean, but he also envied him. Where Sinatra pushed and fought for every ounce of control, Martin appeared to coast through life. There are stories of Sinatra's famous temper flaring whenever he felt overshadowed. One Vegas insider recalled how Sinatra hated it when Dean stole laughs on stage with just a shrug or a lazy joke. Yet despite the tension, their partnership became one of Hollywood's most enduring friendships. When Sinatra went into dark moods, Martin was often the only one who could pull him out. Their chemistry, part rivalry, part brotherhood, defined an era of entertainment where actors could be singers and singers could be movie stars. And that Rat Pack lifestyle, the tuxedos, the late-night shows, the smoky lounges, it wasn't just an act, it was a cultural movement. Dean and Frank weren't just entertainers, they were symbols of mid-century cool, men who embodied the fantasy of being both on screen and on stage. If Dean Martin embodied effortless charm, Judy Garland represented something very different: raw talent, vulnerability, and the crushing weight of Hollywood stardom. Garland's story is legendary. Discovered as a child, thrust into the spotlight by MGM, and immortalized at just 16 years old in The Wizard of Oz, her performance of Over the Rainbow remains one of the most iconic moments in Hollywood history. But it came at a devastating cost. MGM executives saw her not as a child, but as a product. They controlled her diet, forced her into grueling filming schedules, and even supplied her with pills to keep her energy up during the day and to make her sleep at night. As she grew older, Judy's extraordinary voice became her escape. Films like Meet Me in St. Louis and A Star is Born showcased her ability to sing with a depth of emotion that few could match. Unlike Dean Martin or Sinatra, Judy's performances were often gut-wrenching, filled with heartbreak, longing, and a fragility that mirrored her own life. Yet, Garland's career was riddled with scandal. Her battles with addiction were no secret, and the press loved to exploit her struggles. Studio executives often considered her difficult, but the reality was far darker. She had been a child star, robbed of a childhood, a woman exploited for her talent while being denied control of her own life. Still, on stage, Judy was untouchable. Her legendary 1961 concert at Carnegie Hall is still called the greatest night in show business history. The audience wasn't just watching a singer, they were witnessing survival. Every note felt like a confession, every song a battle cry. What makes Judy Garland's story unforgettable is the contrast, the golden voice that defined Hollywood musicals, paired with the tragic off-screen battles that eventually claimed her life at just 47. She was proof that being a double threat wasn't always a blessing. Sometimes, it was a burden too heavy to bear. Few stars embodied golden Hollywood charm, quite like Doris Day, with her bright smile, wholesome persona, and golden voice.
When I was just a little girl, I asked my mother, what will I be?
She was marketed as the girl every man wanted to marry and every woman wanted as a best friend. Day began her career as a band singer in the late 1930s, her smooth, warm vocals quickly catching attention. But when Warner Bros. Signed her in the late 1940s, she transitioned into movies with such ease that it seemed as if she'd been born for the screen. Hits like Calamity Jane, 1953, and Pillow Talk, 1959, cemented her as America's sweetheart. She could sing a ballad that made audiences swoon, then flip into a comedic role that left them laughing. Hollywood executives adored her because she could sell both records and movie tickets. To the public, she was untouchable, the embodiment of optimism, purity, and light in a turbulent post-war America. But the real Doris Day's life was far from the carefree roles she played. Behind closed doors, she endured a string of disastrous marriages. Her third husband, Martin Melcher, not only controlled her career, but also mismanaged her finances so severely that after his death, Day discovered she was millions in debt. On top of that, she had been signed, without her knowledge, into a television deal that would force her to work just to climb out of the financial ruin he left behind. This shocking betrayal clashed with her sunny public image, but Doris Day persevered. Her television series became a hit, and her enduring popularity with audiences proved she was more than just a studio-manufactured star. She was resilient, professional, and fiercely independent when she needed to be. Day's story reminds us of the cruel irony of Hollywood. The woman who sang about love and happiness often lived in its shadow, yet her place in history as both a chart-topping singer and one of the most bankable actresses of the 1950s and 60s remains secure. Before Frank Sinatra, before Dean Martin, there was Bing Crosby, the man who practically invented the singing actor archetype. With his relaxed baritone and easygoing charm, Crosby became one of the most popular entertainers of the 20th century. His recording of White Christmas still holds the record as one of the best-selling singles of all time.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas.
And his film career was equally impressive. Crosby won an Academy Award for Going My Way, 1944, a role that showcased his ability to blend music and acting seamlessly. He wasn't flashy, nor was he trying to be. His style was deceptively simple, casual, conversational, like a friend sharing a song across the table. But it worked. During the 1930s and 40s, his voice defined an era of radio, and his face defined the silver screen. Yet, Crosby's private life has become the subject of heated debate and scandal. While adored publicly as the ultimate family man, wholesome, gentle, and fatherly, later accounts, particularly from some of his children, painted a far darker picture. In his son Gary Crosby's memoir, Going My Own Way, Bing was portrayed as a harsh, sometimes abusive father who ruled his household with an iron hand. Though some dismiss these claims, they cast a long shadow over his legacy. Even so, Crosby's influence on Hollywood cannot be overstated. He paved the way for Sinatra, Martin, and the entire concept of crossover stars. Without Bing Crosby, the idea of a singer seamlessly transitioning into a respected acting career might never have taken root. What's most fascinating is how his image held steady during his lifetime. Audiences never suspected a thing. He was Hollywood's golden boy, the crooner who set the standard, the man every aspiring double threat measured themselves against. By the 1960s, the golden age of Hollywood musicals was fading. The era of Judy Garland and Doris Day was giving way to grittier, more modern cinema. But then came Barbra Streisand, a performer who didn't just follow the tradition of the singing actor, but redefined it entirely. Born in Brooklyn in 1942, Streisand had a voice that was impossible to ignore.
Love, fresh as the morning.
She wasn't the typical Hollywood beauty of the time, and early in her career, studio executives didn't quite know what to do with her. But Streisand didn't bend herself to Hollywood's mold. She forced Hollywood to adapt to her. Her film debut in Funny Girl 1968 was nothing short of revolutionary. Playing the legendary Fanny Brice, Streisand not only sang with a power and emotion that electrified audiences, but also delivered a performance so commanding that she won the Academy Award for Best Actress. Suddenly, the old rules didn't apply. You didn't have to look like Doris Day or sing like Bing Crosby. You could be unapologetically unique and still conquer both worlds. But Streisand's career wasn't free of controversy. Known for being outspoken and uncompromising, she clashed with directors, producers, and co-stars who weren't used to women wielding that kind of power in Hollywood. Her perfectionism was legendary. Some critics labeled her difficult. Others saw her as a trailblazer who refused to settle for anything less than excellence. Streisand also pushed boundaries off-screen. She directed, produced, and wrote, fields where women were often excluded. And while her music career soared with chart-topping albums, she kept audiences riveted with roles in films like The Way We Were and A Star Is Born 1976. Few stars have juggled so many hats with such relentless success. Barbra Streisand wasn't just another singing actor. She was proof that the tradition could survive and thrive in a new era, but only if it evolved. There's something irresistible about the singing actors of Hollywood. They were glamorous, talented, and seemingly unstoppable. But as we've seen, that kind of success came with a cost. Dean Martin's carefree persona masked a private man who sometimes felt distant from the image he projected. Judy Garland's brilliance was shadowed by the crushing weight of a studio system that exploited her until it broke her. Doris Day brought sunshine to millions, even as her personal life was filled with betrayal and disappointment. Bing Crosby reigned supreme on the airwaves and the silver screen, but whispers of his private life cast long shadows on his reputation. And Barbra Streisand, bold and unapologetic, faced criticism for demanding the kind of respect men were simply handed. To be a double threat in Hollywood wasn't just about talent, it was about survival. It meant living two lives at once, the polished image the world adored, and the messy, complicated reality behind the curtain. Some stars managed it gracefully, others paid the ultimate price. As audiences, we remember the voices, the songs, the films. We remember Judy's heartbreaking notes, Dean's smooth crooning, Bing's holiday cheer, Doris's cheerful optimism, Streisand's commanding presence. But behind every flawless performance was a very human story, of rivalry, of scandal, of resilience. The singing actors of Hollywood weren't perfect, but maybe that's what makes them timeless. They remind us that greatness often comes with flaws, and that the most unforgettable performances are born not just from talent but from struggle. And in the end, perhaps that's why we're still drawn to them. Because when a star can sing to our hearts and act out our dreams, when they can be two legends in one, they become more than entertainers. They become immortal. If you loved seeing the actors who sang, don't miss our next video on the singers who acted, the legends who traded the stage for the silver screen, from Elvis Presley to Cher. And if you enjoyed this trip through Hollywood history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another golden Hollywood story.